Now, an investigation into the drive to remove convicted sex offenders from South Africa's public schools has laid bare some disturbing findings. The investigation, produced by Viewfinder, reveals that fewer than 1 in 10 public school teachers have been vetted against the National Register for Sex Offenders. The vetting process, now years behind schedule, remains crippled by confusion, teacher non-compliance, as well as a lack of coordination across government departments. Meanwhile, though, children remain at risk, with scores of convicted sex offenders likely still employed in our schools. Viewfinder's Daneel Knoetze is the co-author of that report and joins us now. Daneel, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it. I mean, I've highlighted just some of the reasoning there, but why don't you just share with us exactly why is it that we're still finding these sex offenders in our schools? 1 in 10 is a sorry number.
Indeed. So these are individuals that carry prior convictions for sex offences, and many of them we found in this investigation likely would have been employed, would have had a clear pathway to employment in public schools in the 9 provinces, largely due to the fact that there has historically been this blind spot in terms of criminal background checks, vetting for incoming teachers. There was confusion specifically before 2019, the date before which the majority of teachers currently in employ would have been taking up their posts, when the South African Council of Educators was not vetting teachers' criminal backgrounds, and nor were the employers, the 9 provincial education departments. In many instances, and we asked all 9 provincial departments about this, in the majority of instances, there was a serious historical blind spot in terms of providing this kind of vetting and checking. And in some instances that we've seen, convicted sex offenders who were hired due to this lack of vetting historically have reoffended in schools. And where this has been exposed in, for example, in civil litigation, the Western Cape High Court, in the case that we found the Department of Education in that province liable for the rape that then occurred on school grounds by this convicted sex offender having been employed without his background ever being checked. Now, fast forward to 2022, the Department of Basic Education, probably full well knowing that vetting was not done sufficiently historically, initiated a renewed retroactive vetting drive for all 405,000 teachers and school staff employed in our public schools to be vetted anew against the National Register of Sex Offenders, which is housed at the Department of Justice. Their initial deadline for that program was the end of 2023, December 2023. We are now 18 months beyond that initial deadline, and still fewer than 1 in 10 individuals employed as teachers or staff in public schools have been vetted and cleared against this register. But already 49 convicted sex offenders in the small sample that have been vetted against this register have been identified in schools. Now extrapolate that number across the entire school population, and if it is a representative sample, we have found that upwards of 230 convicted sex offenders likely would have been employed in schools before this vetting drive kicked off. That might be a very small fraction of the entire school staff population in the country, but I know for a fact that there are officials within the Department of Education that lie awake at night at the prospect that more than 200 individuals that carry these kind of convictions are still employed potentially at schools today.
Listen, just 1 is more than enough to be an ultimately scary statistic, because what that risk that it carries within the schools, and as you said, a lot of them then go on to become reoffenders as well. Has the basic education then, at least in your findings, in this investigation, in this report, been able to detail what exactly the plan is from here? How much more stringent they're going to become in administering this process? Because these promises have, of course, been made. These deadlines have now passed, and still we're sitting with such tragic numbers.
Certainly. To be perfectly honest, neither the police, who play an integral part in the vetting, early phase of the procedure that is outlined, nor the Department of Basic Education respond, and many of the 9 provincial departments that we queried as well did not respond to questions about progress, challenges, and what remedies are foreseen and planned for this. What we do know is that the department has been hamstrung by bottlenecks, shortcomings, challenges across various government departments. So at police stations where teachers are supposed to present themselves, there's been a lot of confusion as to who should pay fees for the processing of the fingerprint reports, which they need to get from the police before they are vetted nationally by the Department of Justice. And there's just been a lot of disconnect and confusion between the police and schools, teachers at the kind of provincial level where this is supposed to be happening. Another crisis awaits at the Department of Justice once these applications for clearance certificates are collated at the provincial departments and sent to Pretoria. There's a massive bottleneck and backlogs accumulating there. So what we found is more than 50,000 applications for clearance certificates from the National Register for Sex Offenders remain unprocessed by the Department of Justice, and the promise of a turnaround strategy to clear that backlog, that promise was made in response to my queries in December already, has not materialized. They are way behind their ability to, their capacity to process and to issue these clearance certificates. Then, of course, there's the issue of non-compliance, non-cooperation by teachers in schools. And I would think that especially teachers who might be fearful of what their criminal backgrounds might be dredged up through this process would have no incentive to proactively cooperate. And I think this is one of the design flaws that were built into this vetting program, that there wasn't really a contingency plan in place for the inevitability of some teachers not complying with the directives to participate.
Daneel, in this investigation, did you find that perhaps some of the paperwork could be a bit confusing? Because it seems as well that from the start, many teachers simply ignore the process when it comes to at least having to fill out those and request those NRSO clearance certificates from the Department of Justice.
Certainly, and I think the Department of Basic Education has conceded as much, that the communication to especially the principals, who are the intermediaries here between the employers, which are the provincial education department head offices, those structures, and then they're the leaders in the schools that are supposed to navigate this legal process of the forms, of the processes that they need their teachers to be subjected to. And we've spoken in the report to representatives from the South African Principals Association, who confirmed to us that really, this isn't, they pushed back against the insinuation that there was a lack of compliance, a lack of will at the school and teacher and principal level. And they really said, this stuff hasn't been explained to us properly. The directives come, but, these are really challenging processes for us to navigate, and there's been no support. Incidentally, in an interview with one of the senior officials overseeing this process with the Department of Basic Education that I had in February already, the department conceded really there has not been sufficient communication for this to be to go down into the grassroots, and for this to really be a seamless process amongst teachers. They committed to addressing that through the course of 2025, but they did not answer to queries as to what they have done to address that. Certainly, I know there are engagements between the police and the Department of Basic Education to have unified directives through the ranks so that the police can cooperate with this process more readily. But the outcomes of those kind of agreements are kind of obfuscated by the lack of engagement that we've been seeing and getting from government in response to our queries on these issues.
Daneel, you guys are really just showing and showcasing a significant work and an important one that we really need to continue to show to government, to those lawmakers, as well as to the police indeed. Thank you so much for your work on this. Then the editor of Viewfinder, that's Daneel, who joins us there. As we just talk about sex offenders in schools, they have not actually been done away with. Government is really still botching what is a crucial learner safety program at present, according to their report.